show your support for the Untold Radio Network family of shows and join in on the conversation by using super stickers and super chats on YouTube. Got a question you want answered? Ask it live via a super chat and get real-time responses from our show's knowledgeable hosts and guests. Help keep the Untold Radio Network shows running strong. We need your support. Send your super chats and stickers now.
Well, hi there, and welcome to episode 78 of Untold Radio's Down South Anomalies. My name is Jay Katz.
And I'm Aspasia.
And we must tell you that every time we broadcast, we're broadcasting on stolen land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and we must acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging. This episode is entitled Victus Haze. What is that?
Well, stranger than fiction.
Yeah, Divine Horsemen and Grand Guignol. Now, we've got something old, something new, and something in the middle of those two that sort of amplify the notion of reality is stranger than fiction. Life imitates art, and art imitates life perpetually. So there's something new. Victus Haze is what's happening directly above our heads at this very moment in time, I believe.
Yeah.
Which is war games in space, Aspasia.
Well,
you know what?
Is it in space?
You know what? Excuse me.
I keep reiterating.
I've got rather scratchy. You know, the space race is on.
Yeah.
But let's think about something old. And what we're going to have a look at is at the turn of the 20th century in the late 1800s, especially out of Europe and primarily France, there was an incredible spate of what would be the beginning, the initial notion of musical theatre.
Yes.
Which was the Hellish Cabaret. And we've worked with people that amplified that, the theatre of hell, many years ago. And then very quickly after the establishment of these incredible venues and the images of what these spaces were like, their atmosphere was astounding, came Grand Guignol.
Guignol, Guignol.
Well, how do you pronounce that?
I don't know. It's just everybody. I hear different pronunciations.
Which means extra large puppets, I believe.
Yes.
And so it was puppet theatre for adults, and it touched on some very extreme themes.
Well, it was sex and violence.
Yeah.
Which is what adults go for. So there was puppets for children, and instead of...
Well, it was people, really.
Well, then, yes, instead of using puppetry for adults, they thought, let's just use adults. But that... sometimes it used to go very horribly wrong.
Well, many members that must have been sort of, you know, at the beginnings of vaudeville, that whole idea.
Yeah.
Well, they actually translated years later into film, radio, and television.
Yes,
and that was really the death of it. It lasted for about 60 years. And it's still out there. People do tributes to Grand Guignol all the time.
All the time, yeah, absolutely.
But it is fascinating. And it
not like they did back then.
No.
Because it's the venues that were so amazing. It was Hieronymus Bosch venues, wasn't it?
It was Dante's Inferno within walking distance. That's what someone's termed it. And in the middle of those two is one of the most astounding and extraordinary filmmakers.
Yes.
Ukrainian in birth, but migrated to the States.
Yes.
And became really the first female avant garde filmmaker. There were many and still are unsung ladies, women out there that actually conquered film before men.
Oh, absolutely. What was her name? Alice.
That's right. She did the largest number of film features.
And she owned her own studio. She owned her own studio.
Well, we're not talking about her. No, we're talking about the extraordinary Maya Deren.
Maya Deren, yeah.
But Maya Deren was not just a filmmaker, a choreographer, a dancer, a lecturer, a stills photographer.
Yeah, yeah.
and this extreme avant-garde artist, but she became the first white voodoo initiate in Haiti.
She did.
And through her film, The Divine Horsemen. And we're going to have a look at that because that film is incredibly anomalous.
Mm-hmm.
And she became really obsessed with the notion of dance
As
a way to conjure,
yes.
to channel the
Yeah.
spirits of
Yeah.
the Luhao.
Mm-hmm.
But let's start right at the beginning. What's happening
Let's.
to us now? And I believe we're actually sitting in the middle, Aspasia,
We are.
of the space race, the brand new 21st century space race. It's not that different to what we experienced 60 years ago. There's a 60-year span in this whole entire trilogy we're doing here today.
Years later, yeah.
But what we're looking at is a couple of companies, one of them called True Anomaly,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And the other one is
that's an interesting name.
They
have really interesting names, don't they?
Yeah.
True Anomaly. What's the other one that with the robotic that they did that we would, they were trying to land on the moon. What was their name?
Oh, that was Intuitive Machine.
Intuitive
They
Machine.
weren't that intuitive.
No intuition whatsoever. But anyway.
So what they're doing is they've set up these fake satellites with this company that I think they're called the Jackal Rocket. As you said
there's
before,
another one.
Be careful of these names. David Pilati warned us of the names of locations. I think that actually that template should be taken to everything, especially the military-industrial complex. And so what they're going to do is they're going to pose as Chinese and Russian satellites that need to be knocked out of the sky.
Right.
That is what Victus Haze is. But again, with the name, hazing? Is this a frat club thing for rich boys?
No.
Anyway, I think what we should do, we should have a look at a couple of news items that highlight what we're discussing here, that we are literally in this incredible space race. The major difference today, though, Aspasia, is the fact that there are other players involved.
Yes.
Not just Russia and America.
Yeah.
You're looking at the Chinese. You're looking at the
Indians.
Japanese, the Indians are in leaps and bounds, surpassing everyone.
Yeah.
But the Japanese space program is astounding because of the outcome of the Second World War.
Yes, right.
They were not allowed to build guidance systems into their rockets.
Yeah.
So they learned how to fire rockets so precisely. Now, I think they've been allowed. But let's just get a little bit of an update here.
So NASA working to send humans back to the moon while other nations making major efforts of their own. So more than half a century after the U.S. beat Russia to the moon, Russia and India in a race to land unmanned spacecraft near the lunar South Pole this month. China plans to send astronauts by 2030. Ice discovered in the region could be used for life support or rocket fuel for future Mars missions. Wild. Legal experts say the race for resources presents new challenges to a 56-year-old treaty that sets guidelines for international space exploration.
A state like China or the United States cannot claim property on the moon, cannot claim territory on the moon. But what does that mean for commercial enterprises? And what does it mean when you want to go to the moon for a specific reason, like getting access to the water ice?
Experts warn China's ambitions could lead to potential conflicts on the moon, but
that fascinates me. Potential conflicts on the moon. Now, I thought at one stage there, by the UN, we weren't allowed to have any weaponry
there was a treaty,
in space.
No weapons in space. Nobody was allowed. But obviously,
now they're talking about conflicts in space and conflicts on the frigging moon. And at the same time, recently, within the last few days, physicists have come out screaming at Elon Musk that his Starlink satellites that are going up via the hundreds and thousands
of them,
are going to strip the magnetosphere. We're going to have cosmic rays coming in. They're going to be damaging the hell out of us. This is getting dangerous. But of course, what we're looking at here, Aspasia,
but you know what? Since when do we pay attention to stuff that we're pushing to go to? We investigate, but without really thinking about the consequences. And sometimes I know you can't predict the consequences of your actions. But, when you're venturing into territory that is so unknown, you really, really got to go carefully. And we're not going carefully, especially when there's money involved. And when it's a race to see who gets there first. Yeah, fools rush in. Anyway.
I wanted to say to you live on the podcast just how much I love you.
Okay.
How much you actually G me up in the morning.
It's day 38 of Space Force basic training at Joint Base San Antonio.
Hey! Exercise, position, roll!
It may look and sound like basic boot camp for soldiers, sailors, Marines, or airmen.
1, hop, 2, hop, 3.
But these are guardians in the U.S. Space Force, the first new branch of the armed services in more than 70 years. And this is the first ever Guardian-only basic training, led entirely by Space Force instructors.
This is still the profession of arms. This is still the United States military. This is not space camp.
Master Sergeant Eric Maestro is the Space Force's first military training instructor, and he's in charge of all training for these 71 recruits over 7.5 weeks.
I come from like an Air Force family, so when Space Force was around, like most people were like, what is that? Like, that's real?
They're like, what? That's a real thing? Yeah, it's a real thing.
The biggest change between this basic training and other boot camps is in the classroom. These Guardians are being taught a brand new Space Force specific curriculum. Everything from space history to space vocabulary.
So if I say the word LEO, L-E-O, that stands for low Earth orbit, right? You need to start thinking along these lines, that the world is bigger than just what you see, that we go out to 22,500 miles into orbit.
None of these Guardians are actually going to space. They'll be operating U.S. military satellites from the ground or analyzing.
All right, let's just cut that news report there. None of these Guardians, we're actually getting them up at the break of dawn. We're exhausting them. They're putting them through rigorous exercises, and they're going straight to a gaming chair and a screen.
But then, it should be called Leo Force, because at the moment,
here we go.
And still, I'm banging this drum. I keep banging this drum until we get people into space, literally into space. You can't be calling anybody a space race.
It's low Earth orbit they're talking about, isn't it? It's so low, it's ridiculous.
Well, the space station is in low Earth orbit. It's not
went
in
into low Earth orbit. They've still got an atmosphere out there. That's how they can use their booster rockets.
Space shuttle never flew into space. It never went into outer space. It was always in low Earth orbit.
Well,
so all of this is really moot. It really is. It really
apart
is.
from the hazing, you can see there that the hazing could come into play in those early morning hours.
That aggressive.
And so it's Space Force behind this.
And how are they who's appointed them the Guardians? It's like Team America, isn't it?
I love
World
the way
Police.
I love the way they said there can't be a Space Force. The trainees.
There can't be. Is that a thing?
Is
it
real?
It's a thing. Sure.
Well, ask Steve Carell. It's very real. They got the
This
copyright.
has been a fascinating week for anyone that follows space, follows intelligence, worries about Russia, where you had a member of Congress basically just like blanket out this alarm that there was this imminent threat that everyone needed to get briefed on immediately. Cleared it for all the members of Congress. They had to go to a skiff. They had to read about this right now. And a lot of us spent Wednesday just kind of scratching our heads going, what could be so imminent? It turned out that they had intelligence that Russia has a new capability, an anti-satellite capability. And what that means is they have some way to disable, destroy, take out U.S. satellites, or they are working on a new way that possibly the U.S. does not.
What have we got here? All they're working on. Now, this has happened only in the last week or so.
Yeah.
Everyone was rushed into one of those closed rooms. It was classified and revealed to them was something, well, we're being told publicly, rather oblique, but it's about a Russian threat in space as the space race builds up.
Welcome to our channel. Don't forget to subscribe and put likes, because your support is important for us. And here we go.
On April 11, 2024, the U.S. Space Force unveiled a groundbreaking collaboration with aerospace titans Rocket Lab and True Anomaly, marking a pivotal step in bolstering the nation's defensive posture in space. Named Victus Haze, this mission stands as a formidable testament to America's resolve to counter potential threats looming in the celestial expanse. At its core, Victus Haze is a meticulously crafted simulation aimed at fortifying the nation's capacity to navigate and neutralize on-orbit aggression, an ominous specter looming large as the cosmos witnesses a surge in rival interests. The mission blueprint entails deploying a rocket lab-crafted spacecraft to intercept and engage with a satellite conjured by true anomaly, effectively emulating a high-stakes scenario of space-based conflict. General Michael Getline, Vice Chief of Space Operations for the Space Force, elucidated the imperative underpinning Victus Haze, underscoring the exigency for proactive measures in deciphering the intent and capability.
What is this language? He elucidated the imperative of Victus Haze. I mean, what are they telling us here? Okay, the space
You know what they're
race
doing?
is on.
As what they've always done.
War games in space.
They're creating, contracts for people to get rich,
Yeah.
for their friends to get
the
rich.
wagging,
I'm telling you now.
as Dave McGowan would say, they are wagging the moon doggy.
Yeah.
But this is not just what they're doing. How about this? There is going to be a whole new time scale.
In a bold space race move, the White House tasked NASA with creating a lunar time standard. This plan, in the face of growing global efforts to tap lunar resources, seeks to regulate coordination in moon activities and cement the U.S. as a trendsetter in space exploration norms. The science chief at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy is driving this mission to collaborate with various U.S. agencies to devise a coordinated lunar time by 2026. This initiative will
What
does
an
that
amazing
mean, a lunar
initiative.
time?
Well, they've got a whole different time down there. So you've got to get your Rolex actually set to that right time, or you're going to be buggered. You're going to miss the mission. You're going to miss the flight back to Earth.
Okay.
All that sort of stuff is
So
going
how
to go
come
on.
they have to? So how come America has to be the trendsetter? The trendsetter. They're still the only trendsetters because they're the only people that went to the moon. So nobody can beat the US.
Let me say
and nobody
this.
has
Let me
still
say
beaten
this.
them.
From a down south,
Even the Americans can't beat themselves.
from a
now.
down south anomalies perspective,
Yes.
I love America. I love Americans,
mate.
and I also respect all the service that people have put in over there.
Absolutely.
But also know we're looking at a hall of mirrors.
Yeah.
Let's step right back to 1930
Yeah.
and just fresh off doing Metropolis,
Mm.
the incredible German director Fritz Lang,
Yes.
who fled to America
Mhm.
because he understood how good it could be, especially when you've got the
Or how
Nazis
bad it
coming
was.
down on you. And let's think about Guy Debord.
Mhm.
Let's think about Rando Nordica
Yeah.
and Orban there, and the notion of the power of the spectacle, which is
Absolutely.
what the Situationists were on about. So
that's what we're on about
I
all the
believe
time
this
now.
film was banned by the Nazis. It
Mm.
was also used covertly by von Braun.
Yeah.
This is the spectacle of the launch.
Yeah.
Das Weltraumschiff Friede ist startbereit. Beim Mondaufgang wird sich das Weltraumschiff ins All erheben. Wenn Gott uns gnädig ist, 36 Stunden später auf der Rückstätte des Mondes zu landen. In diesem Augenblick läuten die Glocken, heulen die Sirenen aller Fabriken, Eisenbahnzüge und Schiffe der ganzen Welt, zu Ehren der Pioniere der Weltraumschifffahrt.
See, the reason why we're looking at this segment here is this is a vertical launch.
Yes.
I believe a lot more dangerous and financially.
Not as fuel efficient, I don't think, because it
No
takes so
way.
much
And
fuel.
but
to
the
lift
power
up.
of the spectacle, if you're selling it to your taxpayer, you're selling it to your proletariat, you need to have actually a powerful statement. And it was believed that NASA was inspired, of course, because Wernher von Braun was one of the people, and numerous papers were signed to. And so, what we're looking at now is that spectacle, that major launch with the huge countdown.
So all these aspects of this launch from the movie Frau de Monde, which is Woman in the Moon in 1930, is basically the template of America's launch protocol.
Exactly.
And the countdown is in this. It's like they've taken everything from this in 1930 and transposed it to 1969.
And you can see there the whole world is watching.
Absolutely.
So please go and check out
It's an amazing
Frau de
film.
Monde.
You should
I
see
think
it.
we might be able to put a link in our notes with it. It's up on YouTube.
Is it? Okay,
Yeah, one of the
people
other.
need to see it. It's just such a startling film. It's just so
So
beautifully
we're trying to show that popular culture, life imitating art,
stranger than fiction, isn't it?
One of the films from the 60s during the space race, well, they had to sell the fact, and they weren't going to tell the American public that they had brought over members of Hitler's elite SS and numerous other ones, which is suspected Wernher von Braun was one of them. He basically told it himself in a memo just directly after the Apollo landing.
Around there, Von
So
Braun
what they had to
SS
do was they had to,
was a Nazi.
They had to desanitize his Nazi past, and they did it with this film, I Aim at the Stars.
The way I tell it to you, that's different.
Oh, go on.
Well, I believe that a big part of the future of mankind will take place in what we now call space. Lord knows I'm a practical scientist, not a poet. But I just can't see space as a vast, inhospitable waste.
Well,
space is the place Sun Ra said,
but it is inhospitable to humanity. I'm sorry,
and it ain't a waste. It ain't a waste.
It's not a waste, but it is definitely inhospitable to humans. We cannot live out in space.
The repackaging and reselling of Von Braun, it happened with Disney as well. He did a lot of work with Walt Disney. It's literally goose steps out onto the set of
every
Disneyland.
Time.
But for people that said we had no idea this guy was a member of Hitler's elite SS, had worked on the V2 rocket at Petermundi, where there were actually anyway, so many people interned working and dying on that spot.
They were
they did know. And how did they know? Through popular culture again. Here's the comedian, the profound comedian, Tom Lehrer.
Gather round while I sing you of Wernher von Braun, a man whose allegiance is ruled by expedience. Call him a Nazi, he won't even frown. Nazi schmazi, says Wernher von Braun.
I'm not going to play you the whole song. The algorithm doesn't like
Nazi schmatz.
But you really do have to go, were they that naive? I mean, he had a huge profile as a stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
So the whole notion of like the American public being unaware that primarily their first highly suspect, and for many reasons, and I'm not talking about the fraudulence of landing and not landing on the moon, but highly suspect in many dynamics was led primarily by Nazi rocket scientists
Absolutely.
post-war.
Mhm.
Now, let's get some images up. Here's the beautiful posters for Woman in the Moon, Frau de Monde. It's a very long film, but it's an amazing film, and it's a great work of art by Fritz Lang.
Yeah.
And I believe there are mythological stories, and I'm not saying I've got these verified, but at one stage, this film was banned because it was seen to be releasing state secrets to the greater world, but it was only banned in Germany, right?
Yeah.
But also,
Well, there wasn't
there were segments of the launch that were taken out and shown in the midst of the V2 failures to Hitler as effective launches.
Yes,
now, I don't know
exactly.
how true that is, but it's part of the mythology. Here's the poster for I Aim at the Stars, the film on Von Braun, and you can actually... It's out there. Here's Von Braun on the set Aspasia of
Disney. Oh
Disneyland.
God, how many times did I see this image in, at 6 o'clock on a Sunday night on the Wonderful World of Disney?
Goose stepping across the screen.
Every time, I've said this before, but every time he came out, my mum would she'd be frothing at the mouth.
Well, she knew.
Oh, she totally knew.
The Greeks
she's
knew.
going, well,
He
he's a
became
Nazi.
so popular. I mean, there it is in Dell comic book form.
Right.
So here, let's just have a look at a couple of photos before Project Paperclip and getting to the States of Von Braun that decry his innocence.
Yeah.
Not really.
Well, he's not wearing the uniform there.
No, but there are.
Yeah.
And there actually are no full shots of him wearing the uniform. He was
he
hyper aware.
Yeah.
But here he is just before he goes to the US. And that fractured, broken left arm has always intrigued me. Do you think in there
State secrets?
reams of microfilm and all this? Now, just talking about the whole independent space race, because there's so many contractors involved, what about this book from the mid-50s in which Von Braun himself states about the only way of getting to Mars would be through independent finance?
Right. Private enterprise.
Private enterprise.
Yeah.
And he comes up with a fictional tale by a maverick called Elon.
Back then.
Back then.
Back in the 60s?
Yeah.
Early 60s?
Listen,
yeah.
You know that whole thing I was saying about the Japanese not allowed a guidance system?
Yeah.
Well, they had incredible film studios like Toho, and they were onto it back then with things like Battle in Outer Space, which I'm sure we're going to be seeing very soon as
Yeah, for sure.
Especially between satellites, and especially when, the Starlink starts removing our magnetosphere. So,
well, as long as they're not sending kids up there to kill each other, and they're sitting in gaming rooms and doing it that way, that's fine. But
they actually spoke about that in terms of conscription. If they were to bring conscription in now, it would be a much easier environment for young people to go to than going onto the front line, like my grandfather did in the First World War there in France. And I was thinking about that today because we've swapped sides. And my grandfather always had the tale of the friend of his, Alf Waterfield.
Oh, right, yeah.
He was in the dugout.
Yeah.
And Alf had changed positions. My grandfather came back and Alf was instantly hit with a bit of a shell and died.
Yeah.
And let's be cautious with each other today. So I think what we'll do is we'll leave Victus Haze.
Victus Haze, yeah.
It's happening above your head. That is the something new that we both feel is actually literally stranger than fiction.
It is strange.
If you went to draft this and get it greenlit by a production company, they'd be laughing at you. They'd be going, "Oh, this is so absurd. No one will believe it."
Yeah. Anyway,
let's go to the mid-40s and this incredible lass, Maya Deren, who was just one of the most remarkable artists of the time.
She was.
And really stepped outside of herself. Just read us a little bit about the beginning of her life and look at these beautiful photos of her.
So Maya was born in Eleonora Deren I had it down.
The pronunciation.
No, I had to say it because it's Deren Kovskaya.
I love the way you say that. Can you say that to me off the cast later?
Later, yeah. On May 1917 of October. And
that's when she was born, is it? Because she didn't give us that.
Sorry,
reference.
so she was born in May 1917. She died in October 1961.
You know, she died at 44 years of age because she had the Dr. Feelgood that John Kennedy had.
I know.
Max Jacobson.
Max Jacobson.
He was giving him too many drugs, man, and killing him.
I know. Anyway, she was an American experimental filmmaker, an important part of the Avant Garde in the 1940s and 50s. She was also a choreographer, dancer, film theorist, poet, lecturer, writer, and photographer. So the function of film, Deren believed, was to create an experience. She combined her expertise in dance and choreography, ethnography, the African spirit religion of Haitian voodoo, symbolist poetry, and Gestalt psychology in a series of perceptual black and white short films using editing, multiple exposures, jump cutting, superimposition, slow motion, and other camera techniques to her advantage. Deren abandoned established notions of physical space and time, innovating through carefully planned films with specific conceptual aims. So Mesh of the Afternoon in 1943, her collaboration with her husband at the time, Alexander Hammond, has been one of the most influential experimental films in American cinema history. Deren went on to make several more films, including, but not limited to, Atland, studying choreography for camera, and Ritual in Transfigured Time.
But her greatest achievement was probably The Divine Horsemen, which was in the late 40s.
Came later.
And she went back and forwards to Haiti. But let's get a little bit of history on her.
I felt that I was in a presence, really, of a new kind of talent. Here was somebody who was able to represent this dream reality, this inner reality, on film. Wonderful.
When I got a camera in my hand, it was like coming home. It was like doing what I always wanted to do without the need to translate it into a verbal form.
Even if she disapproved of what was happening already in cinema, she was a pioneer and she broke the first ice.
I am content if, on those rare occasions whose truth can be stated only by poetry, you will, perhaps, recall an image, even only the aura of my films.
So if you're intrigued by Maya, please keep an eye out for that incredible documentary in the middle of. Yeah. Are you going to tell us something a little bit about the build up to The Divine Horsemen, and then we'll go to a scene from that?
Well,
which is, we'll actually got a link for you. It's up on YouTube. So it's a 50-something minute documentary that is a profound piece of ethnographic cinema.
So she got a grant from the Guggenheim Fellowship in 1946 and enabled her to finance her travel and film footage for what would posthumously become Divine Horsemen.
Right.
So the living gods of Haiti. And she went on 3 additional trips through 1954 to document and record the rituals of Haitian voodoo. Now, the film, The Divine Horseman, was put together later on, posthumously after her death. Yeah,
written a book
she had,
as well.
Same title.
Because you know what she was really obsessed with, and this is something I've become fascinated with and want to do some podcasts with musicians.
So this is what she said. So the ritualistic form treats the human being not as the source of the dramatic action, but as a somewhat depersonalized element in a dramatic whole. The intent of such depersonalization is not the destruction of the individual. On the contrary, it enlarges him beyond the personal dimensions and frees him from the specializations and confines of personality.
Well, just like people using ayahuasca,
yes,
it makes them realize that it's not about the cult of the personality. No. It's not about individualism, that we are part of one huge living consciousness.
Absolutely.
And we need to be aware of that.
Yeah.
But what I was going to state before you interrupted me, not very rudely, beautifully, is that she was obsessed with the notion of music and the fact that you could actually channel spirits.
Yes.
And Haiti, they called it the luau.
Yeah.
And so it was dance and the paranormal. And that's a topic you and I are very curious about exploring with some of the world's most well-known and infamous musicians.
Absolutely.
We're going to have a stab at it. I think it's important now that we look at a couple of minutes from the Divine Horsemen.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something you wanted to say there about the inspiration of Maya?
Oh, just let's watch this and then we'll finish it off with.
All right.
Yep.
Okay.
In Haiti, a divine spirit is called a loa. Legba is a loa who is the link between the visible mortal world and the invisible immortal realms. He is the means and avenue between them, the vertical axis of the universe. As guardian of the sacred gateway, it is he who grants contact with the other loa. Legba must be the first loa to be ritually saluted if this is to be achieved. For this reason, the crossroads is the most important of all ritual figures. Whether drawn in flower on flat ground or traced in the air, the sign of the crossroads is always the juncture where communication between worlds is established, where the traffic of energies and forces between them is set up. Through the center post, the potomiton, gods enter. At its base, the levers are drawn. Around the center post, all ritual movements and dance revolve.
So I believe that's one of the most important ethnographic documentaries made in the 20th century.
Yeah.
It is by an extremely courageous and strong-minded person that actually went out there and became so respected by the Haitians that she was actually filming.
She was so intelligent, that girl. She actually started university at the age of 16.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A profound
she had
historian.
she'd got two doctrines in by the age of 21. She was just amazing. Look, her mum was a dance teacher. I think she was a dance.
Wasn't her father like an academic or something?
Well, her father was a psychiatrist.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So that's where she gets both the.
She actually said in the middle of the 40s that Hollywood had already corrupted the notion of cinema and taken it away from the truth, and she could make a feature.
She hated
for the
Hollywood.
For the price of what it cost to have lipstick on the set.
Yeah, she attacked Hollywood for its artistic, political, income monopoly over American cinema. She stated, "I make my pictures for what Hollywood spends on lipstick," criticizing the amount of money spent on production. She also observed that Hollywood has been a major obstacle in the definition and development of motion pictures as a creative fine art form. She set herself in opposition to the Hollywood film industry standards and practices, and she talks about the freedoms of independent cinema. Artistic freedom means that the amateur filmmaker is never forced to sacrifice visual drama and beauty to a stream of words, to the relentless activity and explanations of a plot, nor is the amateur production expected to return profit on a huge investment by holding the attention of a massive and motley audience for 90 minutes.
She's incredible. Now, she inspired Kenneth Anger, Curtis Harrington,
absolutely, all
so
those
many
people.
other extraordinary filmmakers. Let's just get a little taste of Meshes. All her short films appear to be up on YouTube for you to view for free, but we will give a link to the entire Divine Horseman.
Yeah.
You can just see her agility there. There's
Mhm.
something about the beauty of Maya Deren, and this might be just me lost in my own
She was
reality
into Did I say
tunnel
that
and
she was
find.
into a bit of Gestalt therapy as well?
Yeah.
She loved the Gestalt.
Well,
Who
why
doesn't?
wouldn't she? It was
I
all
love
coming
saying
from
that.
dad's knees. But there's something about her that embodies
Mm.
everything I loved about my mother and her young beauty,
Mhm.
and everything I adore about you.
I see when you said to me, "Oh, she looks like my mother," and I thought, "Hello." But now that I look at her, there's
When
some
my mother was
photos,
really young.
really young.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was that. Yeah,
That
I can see that.
disturbing
Not
beauty.
disturbing. It wasn't disturbing. She wasn't
Disturbingly beautiful.
Okay. All right. Look, her legacy, Maya's legacy, was an inspiration to such up-and-coming avant-garde filmmakers as Curtis Harrington, Stan Brakhage, and Kenneth Anger, who emulated her independent and entrepreneurial spirit. Her influence can also be seen in films by Carolee Schneemann, Barbara Harmer, and Sue Friedrich. In his review of renowned experimental filmmaker David Lynch's Inland Empire, writer Jim Emerson compares the work to Meshes of the Afternoon, apparently a favorite of Lynch's. So Lynch was
That's understandable.
Yeah. And Deren was a key figure in the creation of the new American cinema, highlighting personal, experimental, underground film. In 1986, the American Film Institute created the Maya Deren Award to honor independent filmmakers.
Right. And I believe
So,
that documentary In the Mirror
Yeah.
is only recent as well. So
Yeah.
it's about time she got recognized, like Delia Derbyshire,
Well,
for
really,
the incredible impact
Yeah,
on
she
this
had
world.
on film. Yeah.
Again, like, oddly enough, and I'm going to go to a director that should not even articulate, but a lot of her tropes, like Polanski's, have ended up being used in film clips and things like that. And Meshes is one of those films.
Meshes in the Afternoon, yeah.
Let's have a short break and come back to the Cabaret of Hell. Well, you know what, Aspersia, when an ex-copper like Brian King Sharp
Mhm.
gets behind investigating Sasquatch,
Yeah.
you better be sure
That's right.
that things are going to come out to the public that have never been heard before. Get
Absolutely.
behind Hanger One. Check that book out. It is immersive.
There's a few
It
books
comes
there.
with astounding. There is tons of great
Yeah.
books there, but that
Yeah.
is going to be a remarkable book. It really is. It's available now. Get online, purchase it. Get a Down South Anomalies t-shirt from the shop and send it to us. We can't afford it. Okay, let's talk about the Cabaret of Hell,
man.
the theater of hell.
Yes, well,
And you know, this was in the height of spiritualism going insane.
absolutely. Well,
At
you
the
kind
turn
of
of the
yeah.
20th century,
If-
the late 1800s.
If you had spiritualism going on in the home after dinner, you know what I mean, as entertainment, what do you think's going to happen when you
Levitating
go
tables.
out? Yeah,
Here's a ticket to the attractions Diabolics.
seances. Yeah.
And here's what you'd find over the door of the Hellish Cabaret. Now, the Hellish Cabaret came before
So
the Theatre of
attraction
Terror,
unique. Yes, the theatre of terror.
which is the other term, the colloquial
Yeah,
term
yeah.
for
Hellish Cabaret. Look at that. Is
Grand
that
Guignol.
man? That's that.
And
the
so
inside of
people
it.
love the ambience. And if you're only listening on audio, you're out there jogging or doing something absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
You should be dancing, not jogging. It's
Yeah.
too high impact.
Yeah.
Get onto YouTube. Check us out. We're highly visual. We're looking at the insides of these clubs, which were 1892, I think they first started to appear.
Mhm.
Look at that.
That's just.
And it was the ambience, it was the atmosphere. Very rarely was there even an act on
Is that
initially.
carved in rock or what?
It
Just
looks like it is, but again,
styrofoam?
it
Well,
could be
no,
like
styrofoam wouldn't be
some
styrofoam.
form
Might
of
be.
concrete or something.
Maybe, yeah.
Here's the
Look at
front.
those doorways.
Yeah.
Just amazing.
How beautiful are
They're
they?
just stunning, aren't they?
Yeah.
You never see things like that anymore.
There it is. There's a
Wow.
night scene
That's
from that,
beautiful.
which I think this was the premiere one.
Yeah, right.
And I
Yeah.
can't pronounce the French, of course. That's why they threw me off the Australian broadcasters, SBS. They didn't throw me off, but I
No,
should have
but
been
yeah.
thrown off. This is
Yeah.
a daytime shot.
Oh, that would
So
have been
beautiful.
traumatic pulling that thing down.
There it is today.
Oh, how boring.
So how do you
boring.
pronounce that? The
Cafe, what is it?
D'Enter.
Denfer?
Yeah, that's more
Denfer.
like it. Here's a different one. In the end, they started to put up the counterpoint, like they'd have the heaven and the hell
Oh,
one.
right. Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Here's a bit of a meeting. Looks like a religious get together,
It
but as you can
does.
see on stage
Yeah.
is the beginnings of Grand Guignol.
Guignol,
Yeah. So these were like the truth of like the musical theatre restaurant,
Yeah.
like Dracula's in Melbourne.
Mm-hmm.
This is the serial killer. I think it's contemporary name,
Yeah.
but they actually watched murders be replayed
Oh,
in
right,
this
okay.
one. And so the Grand Guignol ended up starting
Oh,
as
right.
a theatre
Yeah.
itself.
Yep.
Yep. And
Yeah.
you must have seen the posters are just unbelievable.
Yeah.
They're remarkable.
The
They are
posters are-
so beautiful.
Yeah.
And so we'll run through a few of these.
Yeah.
And as you can see, they got darker and darker and darker. The laboratory of hallucinations. I had no idea that MK Ultra and Godlip were operating in that time. But look how beautiful
Had to
that
come from
is.
somewhere. Oh, that beautiful
Incredible artwork.
Yeah, yeah, the artwork's
And just the
astounding.
notion of like, why would people want to go out? And as we said before, it means large puppet. They wanted to go out because they wanted to experience the full gamut of human emotions:
Mhm.
fear, excitement, hilariousness,
Yeah.
but primarily fear.
Macabreness,
There you
that's-
go.
yeah,
Look
yeah.
at that.
That looks like the brain that
This would
wouldn't
have
die.
infuriated the.
Well, they've cut the top off.
Yes, they
Yeah,
have.
so it's just
Yeah.
a T, not a.
How beautiful
yeah,
is
that's
that?
amazing.
Yeah. This is incredible. There's just this imagery, the specters. So we're looking at the moment for those people on audio, some posters
posters
of
are just
original artwork out of France
Amazing artwork.
at the turn of the 20th century for the Theatre of Grand Guignol that lasted really into the 60s.
That's getting more modern now. You can
That's
see.
getting,
yeah.
you're getting the feeling of the giallo here, aren't you? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, you are.
Just keep rolling.
Yeah.
Aspasia, my
Yeah.
dear.
Okay, that's
You've
the.
taken over. I was sitting on this side to do this.
Well, that's
Hey,
okay.
we get a little cryptozoological
Ooh,
here.
hello.
Isn't that Annalise?
Yeah.
Pervert.
Wow.
And
Wow.
here the next one is true. You've got what looks like the merging of theatre and cinema with
Yeah.
the cabinet of Dr. Caligari
Yeah,
coming
exactly.
together. Let's have a look at a few stills from Grand Guignol.
Yeah.
And I suspect as a small child, I actually witnessed at our school hall, unbeknownst to me, what was supposed to be a magic show that turned into Grand Guignol.
Right,
Freaked the
okay.
hell out of us. We were all screaming and we ran out in fear.
Did your parents know that that's what was going to be
No,
happening?
it was never
Wow, look at
discussed again.
that.
I have to bring that up. I think that's more contemporary,
Yeah.
getting into the mid 20th century.
Yeah.
Here's the embracing of it by the Japanese.
Whoa.
All
That's
right.
hardcore there.
Here's
Yeah.
now check this book out. Really worth
Oh,
a
Theatre of
looking.
Fear
Mel
and
Gordon,
Horror.
who has written numerous books on
Yeah.
Grand Guignol.
Yeah.
We've got one of them.
We do. We
Look at
do.
that
It's
poster.
a beautiful, beautiful.
And
book.
here is a movie out of Japan that looks the Tokyo Grand Guignol. That
Oh,
looks really out of
Wow.
control.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. There you go.
Okay. Get rid of those stills.
Yeah. I will get rid of those
Well,
stills.
thank you, my darling.
You're
Can you move
welcome.
right up to the moving footage?
Yep. And here we are.
Okay. So let's actually have a little look just very quickly at a little history and put the mic on and I'll read this. Again, look how beautiful these facades are, especially. I really would. They're really worth taking a look at because visually they are overwhelming, extraordinarily and it just shows you how much right, Kieran, I think it'd be good to actually go and, if you're fascinated, go and check out some of that research. But let's thank the Midnight Archive for this incredible interview with our author of the book behind Grand Guignol.
Yeah.
I'm Mal Gordon. I'm the author of a book that came out in several editions. It's called The Grand Guignol, The Theater of Terror and Horror. The Grand Guignol began in 1897 and lasted about 60-some years. And every decade, every generation, it was somewhat different, but it had the same attractions of sex and violence. The word means big puppets, and the idea behind it was to create a sort of sensationalist puppet show, not for children, but for adults. And what would stimulate adults to laugh and to cry and to react like children? This is sex and violence. Grand Guignol became one of the biggest tourist attractions in Paris, and there's so many funny things about it. One is the people who are attracted to it, other than tourists, like Ho Chi Minh, who is a Chinese pastry chef. The King of Romania and his mistress had their own bedroom in the back of the Grand Guignol where they made love while they watched it. The folklore of the Grand Guignol is extraordinary. It's a theater of horror and terror, but the actors actually suffered horror and terror, sometimes more than the audiences. Many of them were injured in the productions. Two of them died. Some of the playwrights outside the theater who wrote about death died on opening night. So it has this extensive folklore. One of the interesting things about the Grand Guignol is it started as a chapel. And when you look at it, it has this otherworldly presence. And the productions generally ran according to an idea of what they called hot and cold showers. Sex farces interspersed with horrific plays, with comedies, and then horrific plays yet again. On the average evening, 2 people would faint, sometimes as many as 15. And the people who would faint are almost always males, because it said that males...
Just shows you the male of the species cannot handle it at all. But what an incredible thing. Thanks to the Midnight Archive. Go and check out that short little film and the other stuff that they have up on their YouTube channel.
It's fascinating.
And that book is an absolute definitive work.
We think we're cutting edge and, you know, we're at the height of whatever.
Artistic
but,
and...
Yeah, but, I mean, if you look at this stuff...
that whole
it's
misconception that the Victorian era was far much more conservative. I mean, they were taking the young
Victorian
children...
era in England would have been, but the Victorian era...
I don't even know about that.
Time in...
When you're taking your kids to an opium den for a rite of passage...
What? In
know?
England? Well,
there
maybe
you just got on the ferry and went over to Europe and did all that stuff, all that
but this was
debauchery.
happening in Paris, you know, that and cabaret was happening in
Paris was always ahead of the game in terms of nightlife.
And Germany.
They started the first gay clubs, lesbian gay clubs over there in the 20s. So they were cutting edge.
Yeah.
And that's where the surrealists, the Dadaists, all those radical art movements really kicked off.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think it's how fascinating is that?
Yeah, we've gone from pillar to post in this one.
We certainly have.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was something old.
Fascinating stuff. Yeah, that was something
Maya
really
Deren
old.
was something in the middle.
In the middle, yeah.
And Victus Haze
is new, brand new. Not really.
I wish they'd
again.
give up that race, stop worrying about the moon and Mars, and come down here and just start building great nightclubs.
Oh.
You know? Give us some great entertainment.
Great nightclubs, and maybe, you know, sort out some people that are suffering a little bit and help them. But
exactly. Now, just before we end, you were telling me that a great series went up on Netflix recently by Spielberg. It's probably about at least a year old. It was a short series, and it's reality based.
Yeah.
But the story is
the UFO.
That Spielberg is working, and it's really tight secret at the moment.
Well, it's not that tight secret.
On what could be the new Close Encounters or the new E.T. That's going to be his next major feature film, and it's going to take advantage of all the information from our whistleblowers.
It is being reported that Steven Spielberg's next film is going to be a UFO-based movie not much information has come out about the premise of this.
Okay.
There you go. Not much
Well,
information.
if he knows about it and we know about it, it ain't that much
I'm
of
going
a
to say
secret.
congratulations to the Cairns boys, because
Oh.
Late Night with the Devil
Yeah.
and its theatrical release across the world
Yeah.
is going off as
going
we
off like a
predicted
cracker.
in this podcast.
Absolutely.
And we were so unable to speak about the nuances of that film. Historically,
Well,
references even to
yeah.
Rosemary's Baby, Anton LaVey,
Yeah.
who was more showman than shaman, the head of the Church of Satan at that stage. And our friend Greg Turkington, Neil Hamburger, went in and got him on the pump organ before he died.
He did.
And he did the 10-inch EP, A Holiday with Satan. That is a
Yeah.
remarkable, where, you know, believe it or not, Anton LaVey, all he wanted to do was play Noel Coward songs on the pump organ.
There you go.
Anyway, look, I can't thank you all enough for being with us.
Yeah.
We do absolutely have confirmation that our forensic pathologist, our neuroscientist, and our head of MUFON in Australia and New Zealand, Roger Stankovic, will be back in our next interview, because there has been dramatic revelations
There has.
in the US
On the Havana syndrome.
the notion of who is behind Havana syndrome.
Yep.
So, you know, let's go down
We
to
will.
Cuba for
And
patient
we'll have,
zero. And Gary Keating's
Keating is
coming back for part 2.
Of
The man who channeled Percy Fawcett after a lightning bolt struck him.
Yeah.
I
Well, yeah, didn't quite.
Didn't really
strike
strike
but
him.
Yeah.
I think something had struck him.
Exploded in the-
Some
exploded in-
combustibles had struck him before that.
Yeah, but the striking was the Hills Hoist clothesline and something
Such
went
a
out.
great Australian story
I
that
know,
became
it's
huge
amazing.
international incident.
Absolutely.
And that is
Anyway.
the first time he's ever spoken about that story. So we
I know.
feel proud and privileged
Yeah.
to have the director of Sons of
He
Steel
told, yeah,
back
he told
for
us
part
that
2.
quite a few years ago, but he said that, you know, at that
Kept it
time,
close to his heart.
he'd only told us at that time that we were the only people that he'd ever spoken to about it at the time. We never said anything, but we'd been on at him about, you know,
Driving
talking
him
about
mad.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
driving him. Just
It's the most
harassing
fascinating
him.
story.
It is a
It's
very
so
fascinating
incredible.
story. Yeah.
Now,
and he's such a fascinating person.
Oh, what a
The
life.
things and
Yeah.
places and you know, stuff that
Kim
he's
Fowley
done
with the
is just
taxi meter.
amazing.
So
Anyway,
we'll get, and all the Carter Brown stuff. We
Yeah,
we
yeah,
need
yeah,
to actually
yeah.
get to Australia's
Absolutely.
Mickey Spillane
Yeah.
and his taste for the world of the anomalous.
exactly.
All right, we are Down South Anomalies, Jay Katz and Aspis here. We're so proud to be part of the Untold Radio Network.
That
we
we
have
are.
to thank all our subscribers, listeners, and viewers.
Yeah, supporters.
Please go and check us out on YouTube. You've got to watch the entire program for your thumbs up or for your number to count in that godforsaken algorithm that is,
look.
you know, controlling us all.
All
But
we can
let's
do is
manipulate that algorithm
put
to
it
make it work.
together, put it out.
I want to
and
thank the moderators there, Catherine Four Feathers, the incredible soul of the earth, John Ayres, who's been sending me some wicked, hilarious stories. Watch out for your wife, John. She's becoming aware of our banter. And Diane, all the subscribers out there, Nexip, Bristol.
all the people in the chat room.
The great people. Malcolm Carter writes us the most beautiful things every
Yeah.
week and inspires us to keep going.
Yeah.
There is probably numerous people that we haven't stated that we adore. We adore all our podcasters that do incredible programs out there.
Yeah.
Tim and Dana, what a power couple they are.
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
believe they had all boys.
Did they? What does
Yeah.
that mean?
Well, it just means, you know, they had all boys.
Okay.
All right.
All right. thanks.
Okay, take good care. We will catch you next week with Roger. You have been on episode 78. Life, believe it or not, is much stranger than fiction.